update on team. That is gonna save me hours. Okay, so brief highlights of this next semester. So we have to be done with everything by May 5th or whatever. And then we got the vigilante parade right after the test. I did that for you. I know, I give almost too much. And that's just the way it is. Same day, I know. Yeah, that's.
You know what?
They should, the college board should do the test. They should, only Helen. Do you know what time the test is? 4 AM. Yeah, it's always in the APUSH history is by far the biggest. It's almost 3 pounds. The test itself.
Oh.
No, the most people take it. And so that was pretty much set. Everyone else, they kind of bounce around, but we're always in they do 2 weeks of AP exams. We're always in Friday. Oh, who else has more than one AP exam? Oh, you're gonna have such a good week. I envy you. I know that's a tough week. Yeah, okay.
Classes for AP next year.
Next month. Yeah.
So I know it's really far away, but for second semester tests, is it like last test, but like it's everything? Or is it just second semester?
Okay, this one's gonna be the next second semester test. It's all gonna be feats of strength. Feats of strength. Yeah, just breaks.
We're actually gonna make time.
No, the test, it will not be the same kind of test. It will be, most of it will be on second semester. There'll be a few questions from first semester. But the big thing about it is that we're gonna do it about a week and a half or 2 weeks after the APs. So we'll do it, well, it's still pretty fresh in your mind, so I'll fill any loose ends. Because we never quite get to the modern history as much as, just cramming things up before the test. Finish up any loose ends, and then we take the test. And so it should all be pretty fresh. Hopefully. Yeah, like forget everything. That's acting. Pretty good, huh? No formal training. And then after the exam, fitness, right? Actually, it's gonna be moat digging. I've decided we're just gonna dig a moat. Yeah, you get extra credit for alligators. I'm not really planning oil and alligators, but fire resistant alligators. So yeah, those are more difficult to find. No, I make, we take it. We still have to do stuff, but it's gonna be significantly easier. It'll be as nice. It's a good way to end the year. We always do something fun in there. And then if everything goes right, you probably want to be here for 5. Call out on that day because we've already taken our fun. I think that's a good, I know how hard you're gonna work for the APs. So I understand that, and so then we take it easy at the end. Unless you want to be challenged, really challenged. No, you guys are gonna be challenged enough. Okay, so let's go ahead and I did assign page or 847 to 868 in chapter 19 somewhere, correct? Or 18, one of the chapters, but tomorrow have to be read. Sound good? So I got right in the middle of corporations. I was hoping to get past this, but let's go and finish corporations. So right in the middle of it, let's go. Oh, by the way, you notice all the torture devices? Western Civ, we always do a project at the end of the year, and those castles, they do a great job. Here, a very nasty one. You know what that one is?
Yeah.
Oh.
You straddle it, they put the weights in your feet and slowly. And by the way, if it sounds bad, as I understand it, it's significantly worse than you think. But this is my favorite. They did very well. This is Western Civ. Our final Western Civ, we do a small fairly. Let's go with that. The rack. And I love that she put right in the yeah, right. He's so happy about it. He's very happy. We have a trebuchet. Somebody made this little piece of chainmail and it took them forever.
I saw, I tasted the business, my great much nice. I got very light and
Yeah, he bought that, but yeah, he had a full suit of chainmail. It was about 45 pounds. They were tough. My generation was tough. That's how we used to have to be to school and chain mail.
Yeah.
So did we get to corporate? We got to corporations, right? The whole thing about limiting risk. Did we get to limited liability?
Yeah, that's what we.
Okay, so let's go and get to that. Limited liability, that's the whole thing about corporations. It's really risky to risk your own money in business. And it's hard to get paid. But the thing is, machines are so expensive. Corporations spread the risk out. Now, this Robert, we quit. Okay, so they spread the risk out. So you're only liable for the amount you put in. So let's say you invest $100 into Partridge Incorporated, which by the way, trust me, we're going places. We make change. That's my motto. If you invest in me, and no matter what I do in that running that corporation, which corporations aren't quite, but let's say I'm running the corporation too. No matter what I do, you're only liable for that $100. So if the corporation, Partridge Incorporated, borrows a bunch of money, has, buys a bunch of, I'm not sure what we're making, donkulators, but we're making stuff, I buy all the material and we don't pay back the supplier, all that stuff, doesn't matter. You're only out the $100 you invested. You see the advantage of that. So that encourages investment, but it's more than that. Oh, I should add, it's a heck of a lot easier to invest in someone else's corporation or company than starting your own. It's really, really hard. You have a family member or part of a family that has a business, you know how hard it is. And so with that, here's the thing then, you're using other people's money. Won't this encourage risk? If you're not risking your own money, you might invest in that new technology. And that could be a very good thing for innovation. It's other people's money. It also encourages borrowing, won't it? If the corporation borrows money from a bank, who's liable if they don't pay it back? The entity, the corporation that encourages borrowing. Now you might ask, why would a bank loan the corporation money? Couple reasons. Interest. They get money back. If the corporation makes money, they make more money and they get more, and the bank or the corporation come back to the bank and borrow more. But there's something else too. Banks are corporations too. If I work for a bank and I sign up on a loan to loan Partridge Incorporated money, wouldn't that be great if I loaned myself money? Gee, I wonder if that kind of stuff ever happened. Moving on. And Partridge Incorporated goes out of business. I'm not out the money. The bank is. Don't think in terms of private individuals once we get to corporations. It's entities. Hey, you remember.
So,
Remember I told you about the Credit Mobilier scandal, where they literally paid themselves money to build their railroad?
yeah, yes, but. That paying yourself money in this, and it's the difference of that paying.
Oh, there's lots of reasons to do it, yeah. I could charge myself more money and write it off as a business loss. Sure, there's lots of reasons. People do it all the time. I don't. I don't. Why do I have to pay myself? Check off a box. No, people do this all the time.
Yes, but what is the practical effect?
It's a way to hide money. So you can move it around and act like you're paying one thing and pay somebody else. You can hide money if you pay yourself. They do it all the time. You pay yourself. Heck, most of the debt the US government owes, they owe to themselves. Government debt is owned by the government. Which is not bad. Remember, they print the money, so it's not that big of a deal. Everything's cool. All right, so here's the thing then. You can really rack up debt. I mean, think about banks. Banks, if you're constrained by how much money you have, but you can borrow money to loan that money. Wow, you can make a lot of money. banks had debts of sometimes 30 to 40 times the amount of money they actually had in reserves. 30 to 40 times is called leverage in the 2008, 2009 financial crisis. They borrowed that much money. Now I know where you're thinking, where do they get the money from? Other banks. They all make the same business deal. This encourages debt. The whole thing is based on so much debt, you can't even imagine. You can't even imagine. Yes.
The maybe uncertain data are very based on hearing first how close people never being paid.
Well, being paid off is a different thing, but it's all imagined.
It's like the dollar and seems to tax people, but they don't think in fact tax them that have something to deal with.
Oh, sure you can. So with that, we're not gonna go into the details of the tax system, but let's say it's significantly more complex and therefore kind of imaginary. So with that, so here's the other thing, Tim. Could you encourage you to just pocket money? Could you borrow other people's money and then pocket it? That's what the Northern Pacific Railroad did and went in. Northern Pacific Railroad did and went in receivership 5 times, which is our bankruptcy in the 1870s and 1890s. You just pay yourself more money, pocket it. Turn that money around to buy more stock to increase the value of stock. You can just do whatever you want to pay yourself more money. So the corporation can turn around then and pay the leading stockholders huge bonuses. Could that happen? All the time. All the time. And so this encourages innovation, but it also encourages money, especially when you start getting close to a monopoly. You know, why put this money in innovation when I just pocket it? We live with this all the time. Apple has put billions of dollars, they buy stock. Apple just buys Apple stock. Billions of dollars every year. Why? That increases the value of Apple stock. How do they pay their biggest or their managers of the company, the CEO? Stock. And so it's like a way to just pay themselves. So they don't invest in research and development, they pay the investment, they figure out ways to take profit. And that's why Apple is becoming kind of junky, because they put a lot of money in that. This is an issue with that. It encourages innovation, but also encourages this. It's an interesting thing. Thanks, Belgium. They came up with it. So there's something else. To actually investment banks, finance, that actually lends money to corporations, help the corporations establish, loan to this or investors. Investment banks actually help corporations establish. They're the ones who invest in things like the stock market and the buying and trading of stocks in these companies. That became an even better way to make money. They could invest and make even more money. The bankers who invested in stocks or loan money turned out to be the richest people in the world by the end of this century, and are the richest people in the world now. Overall, generally, the buying and selling of stock. I mean, they have companies called private equity. Have you ever heard of the name Warren Buffett? That's what Warren Buffett does. He works with investment bankers to get super rich.
So where does this thing access? Let's say already affect and with that our currency and has no real value.
Well, currency has value because the government says it.
Yes, yes.
Nothing. Well, let's get back. Where the money comes from is either they take money from everybody else, or it sucks up to the top, or the country literally just creates wealth. Wealth is constantly being created. Wealth and money is being created. Yes. Yeah. So at that. And so the best thing about it is corporations allow you to get big. Corporations, remember the big advantage, or everyone's looking for a way to limit risk. And what's the way to limit risk? Use economies of scale to get big. Corporations allow you to get big. Corporations allow you to get big. This is a huge advantage. When the risk is spread out, you can get big. And there's all kinds of advantages from getting bigger. So here are some of the leading corporate leaders, everybody from Carnegie to Vanderbilt, kind of divvying the country up. It's supposed to be the country, that's supposed to be Florida. I know it's kind of hard to make out, but just imagine that's the country and go with it. And so with that, one of the things that happened though, this goes back to the very foundation of the country. Even before the country was a democracy, democracies do fear that concentrated wealth. They feared monopolies. Andrew Jackson was so terrified of monopolies and that concentration of wealth that they could just suck the money up from everybody else if only a few people control the market. Remember, that's why he did that bank war. Remember, the United States was created. The Revolutionary War came out, you could say the biggest act that directly led to the Revolutionary War was that Tea Act and the Tea Party. And that wasn't about the taxes so much as the monopoly, the fear of monopoly. So states saw these entities called corporation and fear of monopoly as the workers are being shoved aside. Lots of cartoons of monopolies as a money bank. And so they were fearful that the wealthy would take over the political system. And this has happened in American history. Remember, when the Constitution was written, this was written by some of the richest people in the United States who feared too much democracy. So there's a history of that in the United States. By the way, wealthy controlling politics is called a plutocracy. A plutocracy. Government of the wealthy. Controlling everything. Plutomany is a government of wealthy. Just the wealthy of the government. And therefore, the states limited the size of these corporations. Every state in the Union limited the size to make sure they would not get too big. So this goes back to the democratic tradition with Andrew Jackson. Once again, the very complex history of the United States and men like Andrew Jackson. The biggest one, corporations can't own other corporations. That's my abbreviation. I'm not saying core, like the Marine Corps, these are corporations. So corporations own other corporations. And so basically it limited the size. But almost immediately you can imagine what's going to happen. Once you have limited liability corporations, they begin to look for ways to get outside of these laws. Almost immediately. Almost immediately. And there was a hodgepodge of laws. If you're in one state, perfectly fine. But what if you're a railroad that goes into Ohio and all here? There's interstate commerce. There's all kinds of complexities here. So they began to look for ways around the laws or to get the laws rewritten. So one of the first things they would do is companies, and this goes back to the beginning of markets, going back to ancient Sumerian, 3000 BC. I know you're once again, Sumerian. A pool is a group of companies, sometimes it's called a cartel, and they get together to set a price floor, saying all of us who agree to get into the pool, we won't drop our prices below this floor, so we won't undercut each other. And therefore, we will all profit. A good example of that were the first subways in New York City. They were all private companies, and they all set prices so they wouldn't collapse. Now, as it turned out, they all collapsed in the city bottom up, but that's also why if you go to New York City, the subway system, which is really cool, but it's very, it's not plain. There's just a bunch of routes and it doesn't go. It's not like you're in Paris and every subway, the subway's all laid out perfectly, you can get anywhere. The US doesn't have. But back to this. The problem with the pool is they're weak. All these companies come together to try to act kind of like a monopoly. The problem is it's an illegal cartel. If you get together to set a price, it's by definition fraud. And every state in the union and federal law says fraud is illegal. So all it takes is one company to say, yeah, I agreed with that, but I'm going to undercut you anyways. What can the other companies do? Hey, you broke our illegal agreement. Which I should add, that's virtually every organized crime war. They all have pools and special topics. One of the choices, and second semester, I kind of want to do this, but 20 games. And it's all the gang wars are somebody undercut, like Al Capone. Yeah.
So why is it illegal to sell?
Because it's fraud. You're lying. What you're doing is you set a secret agreement to set the price high to force every consumer to pay that.
Oh, so they made it fine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So did they set a price floor? So we're not going to go low. So even if by normal market conditions, the price would drop, that would improve. So if that is illegal getting together to set prices, yes,
Couldn't they just like, set a price?
that's fraud, that's illegal. You can't do it open or non-open. You cannot set price. Cannot do that, that's against the law, unless some companies by law, they allow for pools. Have you noticed? If you go around in Helena and look at gas stations and every gas price at every station is the same. Every price is the same. They're all the same. That is state law. Every municipality has to have the same gas prices. Yeah. So one company bigger can't undermine and undercut everybody else. So if you look at the prices, they're all the same. And you go, and one price might be lower. You come back and like, oh, that gas station's lower or higher. In the morning, all the prices will be at that level by the end of the day. Go check them out. For regular, they're all the same price. For diesel, they're all the same price and they all go up. There's some clubs and a few ways around that. Like Costco or some of these places, they can get a little bit more, but they're still in the pool. Yeah, just state. Other states have the same law. But I just remember when I traveled and you go to other places, you'll be at your gas stations 20 cents lower. And it's just so weird because that doesn't happen all the time. I remember when I was in Billings going to school and one gas station did it. Knotheads. They did it. And we're gonna undercut everybody and get off. And they cut their gas prices by 30 cents. It was right when it was in 91, it was during the Gulf War, the first one. Oil prices were gonna go up. And next thing you know, the next day, gas station was shut down and they were taken away. That is a major felony. Okay, so this is weak, by definition weak. Trust. A trust is another way to do it. So what happens is a large competitor goes to other competitors and say, you know, you're an independent company, but you must turn over, I put down turnover stock, but turn over the stock, control of the stock to a common board of trustees. So you're still independent. You still technically own your company, but you're allowing somebody else to control your stock. And so you technically would say there's a bunch of independent companies, but they're all being run by, let's say, the Standard Oil Trust. And trust would become so powerful by the 1880s, it happened so fast that it would become synonymous to this day in the United States with monopoly. And that's why in the very weird way that language happens, in the United States, laws to control monopoly are called antitrust laws. Even though that's now an archaic term that doesn't mean anything in this context, that's why they still exist. And so that's why you're gonna have Standard Oil, and you know that it has small oil companies, just controlling everything like a monster. But it's still technically legal. So it's a way to get around the laws. Now, of course, they're blatantly violating the law. But I love how this one does, how it controls not only banks, but also this is supposed to be city government and the national government. So paying people, politicians, either under the table bribes or contributions. Don't pay attention. We're all cool. We're all making money. Okay, not regular people, but we're making money. But the problem with this is it's a heck of a lot to go through to violate the law. That gets us to the next thing. JP Morgan. Oh, almost jumped the gun. I jumped the gun. Forgot about this. So you're gonna have all these trusts forming, these combinations, and the consolidation of companies. So separate competitors will be consolidated into one company. Now this shows the two different ways of doing it. I don't like this picture enough, so let's go to the next, or a lot. There are two different types of combinations. The first one is called vertical. And vertical combinations, sometimes you see them called vertical integration, sometimes you see them called vertical monopolies, vertical trust, but that's controlling all the means of production. This example shows, if you're food production, you run everything from the ranches, slaughterhouses, refrigerated cars, all the way to the packing plant and the sales. The other kind is called horizontal. Horizontal, That's all the alike industries, like Standard Oil, controlling all the independent refineries. When we think of monopoly, we generally think horizontal, even though vertical is another really good one. And by the way, this gets back to your question. If you control all this, you're essentially paying yourself, aren't you? So each time you can charge more, you're charging yourself more. But that means you're claiming, well, I have vertical integration, we are charging ourselves more, and so your ultimate cost, the price you charge, will be a reflection of you overcharging yourself. And that is a way to increase your price. We had to pay so much. They charge you so much for the cattle. You own the cattle. Cable company doesn't. Power company. Northwestern Energy owns they own coal-fired generators, they own the dams, they own all that. They own the hot wires, they own everything. And so we regulated in the state of Montana, but if you go to a place like Texas, that's one of the reasons why they were paying $1,000 heating bills. Because when they yes.
I am there could be made if we can go to Texas.
Because it gets cold there.
Really?
Not as cold here, but yeah. It gets cold there. And don't forget, we might be, I know we're so tough here, but if you're not used to 30 degrees and it gets to 30 degrees, that's bitterly cold. So let's give you a couple examples. So horizontal integration, the best example, even though he was also vertical, was John D. Rockefeller. He owned 97% of oil refiners or controlled them by the end of the century. And that's a picture of Rockefeller on the top as an elderly man. But here's Rockefeller as a younger man, and there's other pictures showing him here, but also controlling the railroads. Another example is Cornelius Vanderbilt. He owned the New York Central system. The New York Central ran here, and they kind of filtered to the northwest or the northeast and north central. Really big railroad. He didn't buy all the track. When he went to smaller railroads and scooped them up. Scooped them up. The Commodore. Here is that's Andrew Carnegie. If you say it pronounced Carnegie, it's Carnegie. So I very pronounce things all the time. But vertical. Carnegie control, or Gustav Swift we mentioned before, meatpacking. He controlled everything from the feedlots, slaughterhouses, processing, distribution. Carnegie owned Carnegie Steel, eventually become U.S. Steel, be bought by J.P. Morgan. But Carnegie controlled the U.S. steel industry. It had 60% of the steel industry in the United States by the 1890s when he sold it for $1 billion. Which back then, $1 billion was a lot of money. Today, I know it's nothing, but back then it was a lot. Being a little facetious, but Carnegie Steel. And the thing was, he controlled everything from the coal and iron to he controlled either directly or indirectly the railroads, the mills, and distribution. He controlled it all. And so you see this from like entertainment, you really can see it where like if a lot of people probably have Netflix, they make their own movies, they have their own production. They control all the way top to bottom. And at first that was a big deal. When they first started coming in, they made a lot of stuff because they could control the market. And now they're kind of infamous for making kind of garbage. It's not, which I know this good show, but that they do if you ever want. I have Netflix and it's like, you gotta be kidding me. Or they figure it out. But we see this a lot. We see this in a lot of things. Wait, I'll show you food, the production of food down the road. It's kind of shocking. And so these are the two different kinds of integration, but they're all at first trust. So they're all doing these things outside the law. Lots of hoops. And that gets us to the next big thing, where if I find my mouse, interlocking directories. The financier, J.P. Morgan, there's still an investment bank, J.P. Morgan Chase. And J.P. Morgan, he was loaning to corporations and making a lot of money. The problem is sometimes corporations go out of business and who pays back the debt? Remember, Who's liable if a corporation goes out of business? The entity is, not the people. And how do you get money back from an entity? That's a legal entity. You know, you might be able to get some other products back, but it's really hard. So his problem was he wanted to spread out the risky investments. He wanted to invest in lots of corporations. He didn't want to invest in the New York Central Railroad. He wants to invest in the Pennsylvania Railroad, the Erie Railroad, the B&O Railroad. And yes, if you play Monopoly and see those railroads, those were real railroads. Still, well, New York Central Pennsylvania is now part of the Conrail system, which became part of the independent from Leverstone. But monopolies. Risk out. The problem is, so you hedge your bet, you invest in corporations, they're in competition with each other. He doesn't want competition between corporations. JP Morgan, and they all acted like they were captains on Commodore, so that's why he has that on. They got a yacht. That still happens today. They all get a yacht. Have you noticed that? Well, he wants them all to make money so he gets his money back. And so what he did is, I'll loan you money, but I want my people on the board of the Pennsylvania, the B&O, the Erie, the C&O, the Norfolk and Western. I'm just going through railroads of the Northeast. Put my people on. And that's called interlocking directories. And so here you have Morgan's lawyers on the board of directors of competitors to make sure they don't undermine each other so they all profit. Now, this is not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. Yes, it is pretty duplicitous and you can argue it's fraud. But some countries like Germany, Japan, this is mandated by law. There are people from the central bank on the board of directors of the biggest corporations in Germany, for example. They're all on there to make sure they don't do anything like unnecessary profit taking. They invest in research and development. There's also somebody representing workers from their labor unions in the German system. So they have a lot different system than here. Germany's a lot different country, and they speak a totally different language. I've learned that too going there. And I tried to yell English louder and they just didn't understand me. But okay, that's me making fun of the stereotypical American and or British tourists. Moving on. So they want to control cultural competition. If they're all, so you notice it kind of operates like a pool, a little bit like a pool. And so that limits, that's why I put a line through it, the risk. They don't want the big booms and busts. They want steady profits for JP Morgan. Now you could argue that could be good for the country or bad for the country. Trust me, it was good for one person, JP Morgan. And the other banks quickly followed. And that gets us to the next thing though. Once again, they're doing jumping through all these hoops to try to control the market. What they need to do instead is change the laws. And that's where we get to holding companies. Holding companies would be created in New Jersey in 1888. Now you might be asking, why New Jersey?
It's because everything terrible comes from New Jersey.
No, that's not true. Part of the reason New Jersey has the reputation it did is because of this law, though. New Jersey is incredibly jealous of New York City. Incredibly. They see all these corporations and banking. It was exploding in New York City. In fact, New York City, and what we know as New York City, was literally just created in the 1880s. And it just said, it's so totally embarrassed. New Jersey, who have never seen this nothing but cows. And they wanted a piece of the pie. And so when the Democratic governor of New Jersey died, very suddenly, a blast from the past, his name was George McClellan. Remember him from the Civil War? When he died and a new Republican governor came in, they changed their laws. They wanted corporations to leave New York City and come to New Jersey. And that's why New Jersey's got a reputation that it being kind of a toxic waste dump in northern New Jersey. If you've ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. Or New Jersey. Southern New Jersey, it's cows. Southern New Jersey is really cool. I tell you. So they would allow other corporations to own corporations. Or sorry, corporations own other corporations. That is what we call a holding. And what happened? All these corporations started packing up and from whatever state they're in and going to New Jersey because that would allow them to get paid. So everyone incorporated in New Jersey, boom, got huge. Most famously, Standard Oil. Standard Oil was in Ohio. There was a lot of oil. There still is oil and coal in this part of Ohio right here. In fact, this was their base of operations. There's no oil in New Jersey, but New Jersey changed their laws. And that gives a massive benefit, not only tax benefits, but they can get super big. And why do you think companies all go farm in the Cayman Islands? Right now, or why do you think Apple does most of their business in Ireland? Tax laws. So corporations, not because they built them, they can go there and take advantage of tax laws and not pay taxes and get rich beyond their belief. So here's Standard Oil, New Jersey. There's no oil there, but they've made their headquarters there. And as soon as Standard Oil did what happened in the next decade, all these companies started moving to New Jersey. I should add, that's how SO or Standard Oil marketed their oil. Standard Oil, SO. Get it? SO. In 1977, they decided as a marketing gimmick that was getting a little old, they wanted something to catch people's eyes. And so they changed their name from SO to what? Exxon, 2 X's. If you go to Europe, it's still Exxon. And so, with that, what did other states do in the next decade? Huh? Exactly. Every state in the union followed suit. Montana is going to be a solely owned entity of one company by the end of this. The Anaconda Company. Everybody would be owned and operated by one company. Yes.
I clearly see that as it in the carcass and people will see nowadays.
Exactly. You know, Butte and Anaconda. Before Anaconda, I used to be a big city, Montana. And so all these holding companies. And here's the thing. By definition, these are going to be probably a monopoly, but corporations then would say, no, we're not a monopoly. We have all the rights as people. And it actually went to the Supreme Court. And holding companies, this is going to be huge. Oh, almost forgot, I jumped the gun. It's going to trigger merger agreements. All these companies will be merged by the end of the 1890s, especially because there's a financial panic. Companies just started ballooning in size. We saw a similar thing in your lifetime. It happened in 2010 and in 2020, 21. COVID, a lot of companies shut their doors and just all these smaller companies were just sucked up by the big companies. And money just poured to the top. So when you ask the question, where does the money come from? It comes from below, just sucked up. And so with that, the 14th Amendment said all people are guaranteed civil rights. Well, a Supreme Court case made its way in the 1890s. It was basically about the right of way for the Southern Pacific Railroad in California. Southern Pacific versus Santa Clara, California. And in the summary of this ruling, the Supreme Court said corporations have 14th Amendment rights, meaning corporations have all the rights you have, but they don't die. Corporations don't have families. Corporations don't have feelings. Now, for the most part, for the next 100 years, the Supreme Court basically just, whatever. The beginning of the 1990s, and now today, this has been used as a precedent to basically say corporations have all the rights of people. They even have religion. A corporation can have a religion. Yes.
It was the word.
Remember, the 14th Amendment said that it defined who is anybody born a U.S. citizen. It also said that everybody is guaranteed equal rights under the Constitution and due process. So the Bill of Rights applies to all people. 14th Amendment is the most important piece of the Constitution. It also says that people who commit insurrection against the country can't be held in elected office. And it also said the U.S. will pay back its debts. It's a big amendment. It applies right now, yeah.
So if a company fails, like a corporation fails, the people are not held liable, the corporation is, But the corporation still has the rights of people.
Yes. I think if money with politicians, yeah. And there's something else too. Let's say I was walking down the street with a hammer. And I walked up and I decided to take this hammer and start beating somebody with the hammer. What's gonna happen to me? Yeah, I would hope so, right? Let's say a corporation kills somebody. What happens? Who's liable? The entity. And the corporation, do corporations kill people?
Yes.
All the time. If you don't believe me, go to Libby. And who was ever arrested for Libby? What happened in Libby, by the way? You know? They were mining asbestos and they didn't tell the world. It's,
Not like the business.
what's that? Oh, really? Oh, your sister was in my class 2 years, 3 years. Yeah, so 4 years ago. Oh, on that happy note, goodbye, everybody. Oh, really? That's.
Corporations follow the rights of people and say people. Sorry.
Well, tell her I said hi, by the way.
Okay, well.
I think she's sitting right there.
Alright. So the corporations follow the rights of people, say you were to take a corporation apart, they have a lawyer.
Corporation has so many lawyers.
And
Oh,
can you even sue a corporation?
well, of course you can. But the problem is, think about size. How many lawyers can you afford? And how many lawyers do you think
That's
by
true.
economies of scale? And so it's really hard to sue a corporation.
Okay.
Really.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Wednesday, there's an assembly for juniors, you always just tag along. Alright.
I mean, you'll come here, if you wanna stay here and work. You can, if you wanna go there. Sound good?
Yep.
Come on.